This is From Courtroom to Carline, the podcast where we discuss life as a lawyer and a parent.
I'm Rick.
And I'm Jenna.
Your host and partners both in the courtroom and in parenting.
Join us as we navigate the fascinating worlds of life as a parent and a lawyer. Get ready for a roller coaster ride where law meets love and where the gavel meets the car line. This is From Courtroom to Carline, a legal parenting podcast, and on today's episode, it's me and Rick.
Hey, Jenna.
Hey, Rick. So today we want to discuss a little bit about our financial literacy journey. I will say that, when my mom was on here, we talked about me growing up, knowing how to save my money and that aspect of it. Rick, did you know how to save money growing up?
Absolutely not. I was working at Subway, living paycheck to paycheck in college, and honestly lived that way even when I was first practicing law at the public defender's office. So I didn't start learning about that until recently, to be honest.
So I know that when we met, we each had our own houses. I was living in St. Pete. Rick was over in Tampa. Found out that I was pregnant, and so we decided to combine homes. So it was, do we move in together at Rick's place or do we move into my place? So Rick had the nicer house. So I moved to Tampa, sold my house, which I am kicking myself for now because now I'm understanding more about real estate and the home price and having tenants and leasing. But, it's over and done with now. We made the decision. So we had moved in. And then what happened?
Well, what happened was kids, and my place wasn't a kid-friendly environment. So we needed to start looking for a good place to live to raise a family. And so we looked in downtown St. Pete because that's where we wanted to be at.
I wanted to be in downtown
That's where Jenna
St.
wanted
Pete.
to be at. I was on board, and because being from Pinellas County, I had lived in North County, specifically Dunedin. I never lived in St. Pete, so I thought it was an interesting place. So we found a place in Uptown, which is over by Crescent Lake.
And I was not a fan of the area. It wasn't what I thought was a great area. Obviously, that has now changed. It was a phenomenal neighborhood, phenomenal family home. But I had never lived in a downtown area before, and it definitely had that, downtown feel. But Rick was like, no, this is a good deal. It was an off-market deal. We need to jump on this. So thank you for being that anchor and confidence that I needed to make the move to buy that home.
And it's funny because, this was probably 2017, I want to
Yes.
say, and I was the one pushing it. And I want to say that now in our journey, Jenna's the one pushing me in almost every decision, almost every aspect, whether it's investing, the law firm, parenting. So I'm the one getting pushed, and I'm always, eventually on board. It takes me a little time, but
I think also too, we have grown in our knowledge of how finances work, how business works, how, just life now works. We'll fast forward to when I was staying at home with our third child. We had rented the townhome because we had moved into our St. Pete home, and we decided to finally sell to buy a bigger house because now our St. Pete home was not big enough for our three children. So we knew that we were going to make a small profit on the townhome. And Rick had posed the question, what do we do with this money? I had never thought of it before. I had just always learned, put it in the bank. But that sparked something in me to start doing some more research. I don't know if you remember, but you had taken our kids to the library and you brought home a book. Do you remember what book that was?
I think it was Why the Rich Get Richer.
Yes, by Robert Kiyosaki.
Robert Kiyosaki, that's right.
So I know most people know that it's Rich Dad, Poor Dad is Robert Kiyosaki's book. I did not read that first. I read the one that Rick brought home. I vividly remember this. It was Thanksgiving. I had that book. We had the three kids in our small home, and Rick was making Thanksgiving dinner while I sat and could not put the book down. So I finished that one book in one day while Rick made Thanksgiving dinner. So thank you for that.
Yes.
But I think it's, we've reaped a lot of rewards from me learning what was in that book.
It was worth the chaotic Thanksgiving that we had. I had. I'll say that. But, just thinking back before my dad passed, one thing that he taught me was, or tried to teach me, and frankly, I wasn't hearing it because I didn't understand what he was even talking about, was asset management. And I didn't even know what an asset was, and so now I absolutely understand what an asset is, and you have to be able to choose your assets wisely, because that's eventually going to be what gets you away from your 9-to-5 job, bring you more time with your kids and more time taking care of yourself, doing the things that you really want to do and, that are going to benefit you personally.
And I think it's, good to hear you say that, he tried to teach you, but we weren't listening. And I think that's so true for many of us, that we get these pieces of information, but maybe at that time in our life, it's just not sinking in. But your dad owned his own insurance company. Your mom owned her insurance company, but it wasn't until, later in life that we're starting to figure out, what the true benefit is of owning your own business. One thing that I can say is, so I am an avid reader. I like to read. Rick likes to do podcasts. So a lot of times I'll give him a big idea. This is what I think we need to be doing, whether it's, crypto or the stock market. And then he takes it to the next level and finds out the intricacies of how that works. One thing, for example, is the self-directed 401k. I had come across it. I don't know if it was in a podcast that Rick had shared to me, but I told him that he needed to look into this. And sure enough, you did phenomenal. How did you find out more about the self-directed 401k once I told you about it?
So I listened to podcasts. Specifically, there was one called Self-Directed IRA, and then there were others like it that taught me how to take your money out of retirement so that you can invest in the things that you want to invest in, and not necessarily have it tied into the stock market or bonds or things that are, frankly, can be risky. Now, that's not to say that there's no risk with, other investments, but the thing I liked about the self-directed 401k or the self-directed IRA is that it allowed me to use that money, put it in my own hands, and invest it into the things that I wanted to, whether it be real estate, or any other different sort of investments that are available. So that was, kind of one of the things that I did that kept my mind occupied once we were having to figure out what do we do with this type of money. And one of the benefits that I was able to figure out was that you could take a participant loan from a self-directed 401k, and that allowed you to start an Amazon business.
Yes. So we're not giving legal advice, and my mom was completely against us doing the self-directed IRA. She was more of the traditional, you do the 401k that your employer gives you. But we wanted to, learn. We saw that there are other things out there, other options out there for us. It was funny too, because I want to say a year or two later, we were Rick listened to a podcast episode on the Passive Income Attorney podcast where they had a guest, Chris Miles. And Chris Miles was, I think he refers to himself as the ex-financial advisor or the anti-financial advisor. So Rick said, Jenna, you have to listen to this podcast. Again, I was mind blown. It took me back just to how I felt when I had read, Why the Rich Are Getting Richer by Robert Kiyosaki. It was just so much information that I did not know was out there. And I told Rick, I think we made the mistake of opening the self-directed 401k. I think we need to just cash it out and do this infinite banking that, Chris Miles is talking about. And at this point, I'm throwing a million things at Rick all the time. And he's like, Jenna, you need to slow down. We need to look into all of this. But for me, I think it's just there's so much information out there that we now have available, whether it's, YouTube, podcast, books, just stuff that I wasn't aware of, 5-10 years ago.
And the thing that was impressed upon me growing up was be a good student, make good grades, get into a good college, be a good employee. And the more it seems like we learn, whether it's through podcasts, YouTube channels, or any sort of self-improvement books. That seems to be not the route that you want to go if you're trying to get financial freedom.
And I don't want to knock on college. Obviously, we would not be where we are if it wasn't for education, college, law school. But I definitely think that opening your own firm, being in control of your own time is definitely a good goal to have. I'm grateful for all of the trials that I had at the public defender's office. I'm grateful that I got to be employed by, the public defender, but I'm also grateful for the knowledge that I'm learning to now go off on my own, practice with my husband. We have way more time for our kids, our family, ourselves. So those have all been benefits, but I wish that we're not now trying to learn all of this information while also raising 3 kids, while also trying to learn financial literacy. So it's been a lot. We definitely keep our mind going all the time in terms of what we can learn, but it's never a dull moment in our house.
And I'll give you a good example. When I was in college, I was having people tell me that I should have listened, get an externship, meet people, make connections. And my mind was thinking, I'm going to be working a job for the next 30, 40 years of my life. Why do I want to start that early? Well, let me just have fun, finish out my college, education. And then once I'm past that, I can then move on to that chapter of my life. So looking back, that was a huge mistake in an incorrect way of viewing, that sort of opportunity that I could have had, because, where we are now with our firm and what we know about marketing and, growing wealth, you've got to build relationships. You have to build those connections, and you have to meet people, because that is the way that you're going to get ahead. It's not through learning something in a book necessarily. It's not through, rising the corporate ladder. It's with people that are going to help you along the way and teach you, the things that aren't readily available. And so that's the one thing that if I had to look back on my college career, I would have done an externship or an internship, try to meet people that could have guided me, that could have mentored me to say, hey, this isn't a job. If I'm going to show you how to run a business, I'm going to show you how to market, and all the things that you're not going to learn about when you go to law school. Law school teaches you so many things, theories and all this, but they don't teach you how to deal with a client. They don't teach you, how to run a business or how to market yourself. So, looking back, I would definitely encourage everyone, if you do go the college route, do an internship, find a mentor, because it's going to be invaluable later in life.
And I love that. I did, a few internships, but I never realized how important they would be in maintaining those contacts and those connections that you're making. Definitely important. I know one thing that we've been doing now that, we're learning about more about finances, investing, real estate, is that we're trying to instill that in our children. So I made Rick play the cash flow game that Robert Kiyosaki has. That game can take about 3 hours. So Rick wasn't too pleased with me, but they also have cash flow for kids. And we got that for our kids. And, we really just want to start them young, understanding, what they should look forward to, what they should work towards, just so that they have that financial foundation that neither one of us had really instilled in us as we were growing up. So definitely, take the time with your kids while they're young to just teach them the importance of, their time is valuable. What can you do to make sure that, they have that time with, their friends, their parents, whatever they want to do as they grow up.
And also, one of the things that you've been doing recently is having goals for them to accomplish. That's very valuable, both for their confidence and for just their discipline to, have a goal in mind and to reach that goal. And the one recently is we signed our kids up for a kid triathlon, right?
Yes.
And so I think it's at the end of June. And when Jenna first told me what they would have to do to complete this triathlon, I was thinking to myself, oh boy, like this is going to be extremely hard. And I can just, I'm trying to stay positive, but part of me is thinking that, oh, this is going to end in tears and stress. But I will say that, we've been committed to trying to practice and train when we get home from school, whether it's
build their confidence,
whether it's doing a couple of laps in the pool, a couple of bike rides around the neighborhood. And I think that's really going to help them and want them to succeed when they finally reach the point where they're competing. And, I'm proud to see what they can do.
Well, and they're focused on, well, what if we don't win? And again, we are just trying to tell them it doesn't matter if you win. We just want to see you finish. And it seems that they are now taking more of ownership and, wanting to get out there and train, getting excited for this youth triathlon. But again, I think it's more just about goals, pushing through those challenges that come up. So we're really excited to see how that goes, and we will definitely fill you guys in with how they did. But at this point from Courtroom to Carline, we are going to segue into our What Happened to Florida Man. So the headline for What Happened to Florida Man is Man Stole 850 Pairs of Underwear from Victoria's Secret. So this happened back in December 20th of 2012, so right before Christmas time. He pled December 5th of 2014. I think he was 18 years old. This was down in Broward County. He was charged with 3 counts of grand theft, third-degree felonies, and I think because there was on 3 different occasions. I want to say the amount was something of $15,475. That is all. So yeah, not as much underwear for $15,000. But when we first discussed this, when we were going over the headlines, I did not realize there was a black market for Victoria's Secret underwear.
You'd be surprised doing criminal law. There's a black market for everything. The one that I would see most is for baby products, diapers, formula. I can't tell you how valuable that stuff is on the streets. And so it doesn't surprise me that, something like this is taking place, because when you have a brand like Victoria's Secret and you say, hey, this is the real thing, this isn't some knockoff underwear brand, people pay for the brand. And so I'm sure that they probably turned that underwear and made quite a profit for themselves. But unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, crime doesn't pay.
And this 18-year-old ended up getting 5 years probation for all 3 counts. It's like you see somebody like this that obviously has drive and motivation to want to make money. I think he just put that energy into something that didn't benefit him. But hopefully, he was able to get past that probation and maybe take that energy and put it towards an actual legitimate legal business.
When you're young, 18 years old, the guidelines in Florida and the rules in Florida allow for a little bit more leniency. There's a thing called the Youthful Offender Statute, which allows someone that's under the age of 21 to get a lesser sentence than what the guidelines would have called for, say, if you're over the age of 21. So that's designed to, take into account the youth and the immature stage in life that, these individuals are at. So he didn't get off light. This isn't an uncommon, sentence for someone his age. I just hope that he learns from it and, applies entrepreneurial spirit to something that is legal, because I think he'll do quite well.
Well, we definitely appreciate you guys listening, and hopefully there were some great takeaways. And thank you for tuning in to From Courtroom to Carline, a legal parenting podcast.